truly understanding where numbers are and how they change over time and being able to just track them and synthesize, hey, is this getting better or worse? Is this a trend? Is this a blip in the radar? I humbly present to you that it's a bit simpler than maybe it sounds. I think the hardest part is just compiling the data.
Welcome to the How to Scale Commercial Real Estate Show. Whether you are an active or passive investor, we'll teach you how to scale your real estate investing business into something big.
Amy Silvas is the founder and principal of Silvas Capital, a real estate firm that invests in large multifamily properties in emerging markets throughout the United States. Amy, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Sam. What a pleasure.
Pleasure's mine. There are 3 questions I ask every guest who comes on the show. In 90 seconds or less, where did you start? Where are you now? How did you get there?
Sure. So started with my first property in Clarksville, Tennessee. Yes. And how did I get there? It was a 10-year long journey of trial and error and some personal medical issues and all sorts of interesting bumps in the road. But it is a story of persistence, of never giving up and making sure I followed my calling.
That is incredible. Now, you're based in Los Angeles, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, Clarksville, Tennessee, while for those of you that don't know, it's kind of a submarket almost of Nashville.
Correct.
Clarksville is north and west of Nashville, if I'm not mistaken. Yep. How in the world did you end up buying a property in Clarksville? This is now a decade ago?
No, a couple years ago.
Okay, a couple years ago. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. It took me 10 years to get into this space. I've been in this space for a couple of years now. Yes.
Got it.
So thankfully, I'm not crazy enough to buy in California. Learned that lesson. I live here because of my family, but rent control and eviction moratoriums that are still in place 2.5 years post-COVID. I am not interested in buying in the state that I call home.
Right.
Instead, I'm a big market research guru, endlessly studying markets, saw that there was mass migration into the greater Nashville MSA, and knew that although there was a ton of institutional competition in the main city, going an hour northwest, as you said, of this incredible city with great economic growth, job announcements, people moving, it was such a great space to begin my journey.
Right. And if you did that 2 years ago, I mean, gosh, that's, Tennessee's had just nothing but influx of residents, even ever since then. So that's absolutely fantastic. What do you feel like? So you bought a property in Clarksville. Where else have you acquired since then?
Yes. So we also own in Augusta, Georgia as a GP, own in Evansville, Indiana, right across the border from Kentucky. Yes. And Decatur, Alabama, just outside of Huntsville.
Yeah. Well, Huntsville's another one of those markets. I mean, not actually too far from, it's just straight down 65 from, actually Clarksville's 24, but then 24 to 65. It still is not a far jump from Clarksville then down to Decatur, Alabama. So that's really, really interesting. How were you able, I guess, in a couple years' time to acquire so many assets?
Partnership. I am a self-admitted only child, type A personality that loves to be self-reliant. And if something needs to be done, gosh darn it, I'm going to go out and get it or do it. But I had great mentorship and realized that I can go further faster by partnering with other folks in this space. So amazing partnerships with people that live in the Southeast and great property management is the recipe to get that going.
Wow. Yeah. Good property management. That's harder in some of these more, other than say, Huntsville. I mean, I think it would be harder in places like Clarksville and places like that to find good PMs. How have you done that?
Yeah, we have one property management company that we work with that is scaled with us. So they're outstanding. Yeah, they have done us good and we have a mutually beneficial relationship there.
Wow. So one that is scaled across all of those assets and all of those various places. You said that you love research, right?
Yes.
So I'm really curious, what research took you to Evansville, Indiana? Like, I know that's right on the Ohio River. It's at the bottom of the state, but I don't know. I don't know that I've spoken with anyone out of 500 and I don't know where we are. When this goes live, we'll be pushing 600 episodes that's investing in Evansville, Indiana. So
let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So think Chattanooga 10 years ago. Okay. Lots of parallels. I know that's a hot take. That's a bold thing to say.
Fair.
But Evansville Evansville is the third largest city in the great state of Indiana. Yep. Indiana sometimes is deemed not as sexy as maybe some of the Southeast markets. But my goodness, is it pro-business? The state government is investing heavily in infrastructure, particularly in Evansville. Always a dynamic, really dynamite sign that a market is emerging. Toyota's bringing a bunch of jobs to the MSA, good manufacturing jobs. We're seeing healthcare jobs and hospital expansion there. So all of those really great key metrics, as well as decreasing property taxes, which you very rarely hear these days. That may not stay, but yeah, quite stunning. They've got a state law that property tax can't be more than 2% of the value of the property. So it's a great environment.
Wow. Now that's yeah. I are a Hoosier. I were a Hoosier. I am a Hoosier.
Okay.
I lived there for 30 years, so I know the state fairly well. Yep. But yeah, I mean so, which is, I'm just surprised. Yeah, Evansville. That's really intriguing. That's just not something. Yes. I would have really thought about. You mentioned the word that the state is, or you mentioned the phrase, the state is heavily investing in infrastructure. Mm-hmm. What does that mean?
Sure. So specifically in the Evansville area, you may be familiar, but there's, for the most part, kind of a disjointed, disconnected 2-lane highway going from most of the way from Evansville up to Indy. Right. That's changing. They're building an actual freeway, building up the infrastructure there for logistics, which is another industry that's growing in the great city of Evansville. They're redoing the bridge to make it wider and more robust across the river over to Kentucky, making rail lines, investing in there and partnering, doing a public-private partnership there as well to help with logistics. So yeah, when the state's willing to invest in doing some of that infrastructure, it's always a good sign.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's really intriguing. There's a lot of parallels and things that you mentioned between Evansville and Memphis, except for the fact that the state is investing heavily in infrastructure. I mean, I'm thinking about things like rail lines. You're on the water. I mean, the Ohio River, for our listeners that aren't familiar with the Midwest, is enormous. Mm-hmm. It's one of the largest feeders into the Mississippi. So, in the amount of goods that are transported up and down from grains to goods, I mean, up and down the Ohio is pretty incredible actually to see. And again, for those of you who aren't listening, just the fact that they're building a larger bridge, between Indiana and Kentucky is a really it's a really big step, because that will actually connect. Now that I think about it, that would then connect really all the way down to Memphis, which is, if we get a major highway running through there, that'll be really awesome. So
yes,
very, very cool. I love that. What resources did you use to research this and say, I mean, because it's one thing to find a newspaper article like, oh, whoop-de-doo, they're building a new bridge across the Ohio. We really don't care. No one pays attention. But to aggregate all this data takes time. How did you do that?
It does. It is quite frankly taken quite a bit of time. I've got a massive spreadsheet. I use some VAs to populate it, but, really looking at trends from the Milken report that comes out every year to simple things like job growth announced by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. A amazing resource that is paid, but for me, it's worth it, called housingalerts.com. I don't know if you've heard of them. They're mostly single family focused, but as we know, single family precedes multifamily. It's a leading indicator by about 12 to 18 months. So a lot of great statistics and forecasting by demographers and economists have that site and pump out that data. So I really look for overall trends, not just, a blip in the radar, but, consistent kind of green lights in all of those metrics.
Is this something you've been kind of traditionally trained in, is in synthesizing this data and then coming up with a conclusion? Because I think you can throw a lot of data at a lot of us, myself included in this, and I just kind of, I look at it for an hour and I go, what does this tell me? I don't even know how to make sense of this. How do you compile all this into something that's meaningful?
Yeah. So, I think to answer your question, not overly trained. I do have an MBA. I do have a background in biotech where, data analysis and all of that has been part of, how I've been trained, but nothing specific. But truly understanding where numbers are and how they change over time, and being able to just track them and synthesize, hey, is this getting better or worse? Is this a trend? Is this a blip in the radar? I humbly present to you that it's a bit simpler than maybe it sounds. I think the hardest part is just compiling the data.
Right. And then painting the picture and saying, okay,
yes,
are things moving? What is the general direction that things are moving in? That's
yes.
really, really awesome. I love that. Talk to us about what it means to, I guess, have a setback in life. Like what's a setback look like in life for you? And then how have you overcome it?
Sure. I love to talk about this just because everyone has setbacks in life, right? None of us gets through this life without a setback or a bump in the road, right? So it's not whether you get knocked down, but whether you get back up. I was born with cystic fibrosis. Some of you may have heard of this. It is a genetic disease that impacts about 30,000 people in the US. And when I was born in 1981, my parents were told that I would live to maybe be 12 years old. Spoiler alert, in 2 weeks, I turned 41. But growing up, there really wasn't much medication or treatment. And, I was in and out of the hospital quite a bit with virulent lung infections that were resistant to antibiotics. And it made it really tough to attend school regularly. And as I became an adult, hold down a job regularly because the nature of the illness is progressive deterioration of my lungs, in addition to several other organs in my body. So, there were some bumps in the road there. Happy to dive in with whatever direction you want to go down.
Wow. Well, I guess, where does that bring you to today? Something has either changed medically or medicinally or something where, we get to have this conversation today.
Yes. Well, really scientifically, not explanation until about 3 years ago as to why I was doing so well and what brought me so far. I say, maybe my hopeful attitude and my faith is how I explain that. But thankfully, a miracle medication did come to the market for the vast majority, not all, of people with cystic fibrosis right before the pandemic in November of 2019. And almost all of, kind of my struggles, I'm no longer in and out of the hospital. All of this has virtually disappeared. So I get to enjoy the great health and live like most people, thankfully.
Wow. That's got to be just, literally life-changing.
Yes. Yeah. It was, there were, again, a bump in the road where COVID came, and so I didn't get to fully kind of experience it until quite recently. But the true gift of it is this perspective. I knew from a very young age how precious life was, that tomorrow wasn't guaranteed. So it was up to me to really take advantage and live life to the fullest, and really led me to this career because I wasn't sure how long or if at all I could trade my time for money. And that was a big realization where I thought, although I'm sure my parents would have taken care of me, I wanted to be financially independent, not be a burden on them. So gosh darn it, I'm going to figure out a way to generate income regardless of my health, so I can continue to pay my bills and live by myself and have a prosperous life. So that is really one of the gifts of going through that struggle that has led me to where I am today.
Wow. That's an incredible perspective, and not one I think that many of us, would imagine or be able to share. If it's like, hey, I've had a debilitating disease the bulk of my life, and yet it's been a gift in its own right.
Yeah, that perspective is everything, right? Because there truly are. It's hard when you're going through it, right? I can relate to maybe people have had other struggles with, family or health or, an inordinate number of things. But, I think it is so important to look back once things do pass, as they always do, sometimes sooner, sometimes later, and see what the gifts are, because they are there and they can be utilized as a superpower moving forward in life.
Wow. That's really, really cool. What did you do before you got into multifamily real estate?
I was in biotech. Raise your hand if you're surprised. But the notion that I could be involved in developing and distributing medications to people that also suffered grievous illness was just really fulfilling. And it was a space I was very comfortable in, both personally, but of course professionally. So I was there for 13 years doing that.
Right, right. Wow, that's absolutely cool. I love that. Let's talk a little bit. Let's thank you for taking the time to really share your
Sure.
personal health journey and using that as a springboard to say, hey, look, anything's possible. So, thank you again for being so willing to talk about that. Certainly
Of
appreciate
course.
it. Let's go
Yeah.
back a little bit and rewind the tape to the data conversation a touch and just kind of caught maybe not so much look in the rearview mirror, but maybe look a little bit out the windshield and say, all right, what do you see? You're in the multifamily space, right? And it's been crazy hot, been lots of money flooding into it. And we have this potential recession on the horizon. We have inflation that's out of control. People are calling for stagflation, which wouldn't surprise me in the slightest. Where are we going from here, and how are you guys preparing for it?
I love this question. Let me get out my crystal ball.
Thank you. You're the first person that's ever said you have one.
It's my superpower. No, it is all about mitigating risk, right? Because none of us has a crystal ball. But to your point, there are ways we can hedge ourselves. We can protect our investment, protect our investors' contribution to our investments by going back to market research. There is no one United States real estate market, right? We all remember 2008 when some markets, I'm in LA, completely tanked.
Right.
Other markets, some in Texas, were like, recession what? Housing crisis who? Right. It was almost a non-event. And it's a great reminder that there are markets in the United States that are so robust and economically friendly, job friendly, all of this. It's not to say we assume that there won't be issues, but you can really hedge yourself with a recession and, being in a market that has recession resistant industries where we know historically jobs aren't being cut. I mentioned Decatur, Alabama. The FBI is expanding thousands of jobs there. The United States Space Force, which is such a wild thing to say, but that's a real thing, is locating from Denver to Huntsville. These are recession-resistant jobs. Not to say that there won't be layoffs or pay cuts, but they really position ourselves, to have still great renter demand. Interest rates are rising. For how long? I don't think any of us know, but we do know the Fed is really in between a rock and a hard place. Midterm elections are coming up. The interest on the national debt is going to become a little tricky if they raise too much. And we're all familiar with the term a taper tantrum, right? The stock market is not happy about this prospect. So in our mind, simply data-wise, looking historically, it's only a matter of time before the Fed starts cutting again. Could be 2 years, could be 3. But history shows us that that's usually the time period from when the Fed raises to when cuts start happening again. So we are, go ahead. That was a bit of a monologue. I'll take a breath.
Oh, I love it. I love it. That's a great way to frame it, because you hear some people, I've been asking this question a lot recently, and some will tell you, how they're buying right. They'll tell you, changes in their underwriting strategy. They'll tell you changes in, what they're forecasting or how they're, changing the debt they bring on. And for you said, hey, you're not really focused on that as much as you are just saying we're buying in the right locations. And I think, I think that's a great answer. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. Yeah, our underwriting, it has definitely changed as well, just to be fully transparent. And, most of our deals could survive half renters not paying at all. We're conservative in that respect and always making sure we protect capital. But the macroeconomic environment's really fascinating as well.
Right. Yeah, the macroeconomic environment is certainly fascinating. But again, just to reiterate, it's not like the microeconomic environment is what you are more focused on. Precisely.
That
is awesome. Amy, I thank you for coming on today. I certainly appreciate it. Are there any other closing thoughts you would have for our listeners or things you'd like to share before we sign off?
Sure thing. I would just encourage folks as they're on their journey, wherever they are in this journey, to know that obstacles are simply a sign that you're getting closer to your goal. And so keep going on, keep persisting. I'm cheering you on. And if you'd like to get in touch with me, would love for you to reach out at silvascapital.com. If you want to chat about market research, the economic environment, or investing, anything like that, I love to talk to people. It's one of the best parts of what I do. So look forward to speaking with you.
Awesome. And for those of you who are listening, that's Sylvis Capital, SYLVIS capital.com. Thank you, Amy, for your time today. I appreciate it.
Appreciate you. Thanks for having me.